I like your perspective on the long-term storage aspects of analog tape, and I understand why you've avoided using digital mediums like Pro Tools or digital tape machines. But if you were to design the ideal digital recording medium or system, how would it generally work compared to what we have available today?
Well, I'm just going to shit all over your question.
Go ahead.
The From a practical standpoint, from a procedural standpoint, all the things that the digital recording systems can do are great. You can keep multiple takes, you can edit at will, you can apply an awful lot of very powerful processing, sort of, surgically or globally. The digital systems work very well in that sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that they don't have is a kind of a permanent archival storage medium or a permanent archival protocol. And so my reservations about working digitally are only in a to a very small degree about the practices, digital practices. Now, that digital practices, generally speaking, I think, make for weaker records. That is the technique of doing many, many takes and compiling a simulacrum of a take from many takes and
Mm-hmm.
fine-tuning all the characteristics of each sound so that it meets some criteria, and then assembling all of these individual components into a kind of a mosaic. I think that as a procedure, that has developed from the digital paradigm, I think makes for weak records. That's a personal prescription, though, and I can completely understand someone from an auteur standpoint wanting to make things just so, and is satisfied by that. So I understand the impulse, and I can't say that somebody is wrong for wanting to indulge that impulse, right? But I think as a pro forma method, just you take a normal band performing their music like always, and then you break it down into these constituent parts and manicure each of the constituent parts and multiply them and layer them and overlap them and create new parts and add new
Mm-hmm.
layers. And like all of that production being brought to bear just sort of pro forma on every session, I think is enormously destructive. I think it sacrifices the personality of the people doing the performances. It sacrifices the genuine charm of something as it is written and as it is performed. It sacrifices that in service of some kind of stylized ideal. But that's a small part of my complaint about digital systems. The
Right.
major complaint that I have is that the music is going to disappear, and there is obsolescence built in by design, but also inevitable because of the continued advance in computer technology, firepower, and architecture. It just automatically creates orphans of things that were done on systems that are not compatible with the present day. There is some degree of backwards compatibility, but it's certainly not perfect, and it's not anywhere near comparable to the essentially effortless compatibility in the analog systems, where I can just take a tape out of the box and put it on a machine and play it, and it doesn't matter when it was recorded. It'll come back, and I can do whatever I like with the sound,
Yeah.
I have often been asked what a digital engineer should do to circumvent the problem of archival permanence, and I am convinced it is an intractable problem. I've been thinking about it my entire professional life, and none of the solutions that have been posited seem at all viable to me. If you make multiple copies and distribute them on a cloud or something like that, well, then there are a number of problems with that. One, I can't do that to my client's music. I can't distribute my client's intellectual property to a bunch of different people that are outside of their control and expect them to behave in a way that's consistent with its security and safety. Now,
Yeah.
it doesn't really matter. This intellectual property concept, I think, is on its face kind of ridiculous, and eventually it will need to be grappled with in a legal sense. But for the moment, I could be held responsible for something leaking out if I were to work with somebody who is famous enough to care. I could be held accountable for that. And it would be an obligation on me to maintain some control over that. So I can't do that. But even if I could, then the specifics of the storage matter an awful lot. Like, what format is it being stored in? What physical medium is it on? The distributed notion of just having it in the cloud, for example, that surrenders access to that material to whoever it is that's managing the cloud storage. And companies go broke and sell their assets and change ownership. And I'm not talking about something being accessible in the near term of like 1 to 4 years. I'm talking about something being accessible in the long term, like a century, right?
Yeah.
Something that qualifies for archival standard, as an archival standard. And there just isn't anything.